storage space.
I also would have thought they would have thought about this problem before. I mean, they're a library. They're supposed to keep books. Wouldn't you have thought they had a storage backup plan? Isn't that the whole point?
Yeah.
Chris?
Well, I mean, in due course, and it needn't be in Wellington, where we're always talking about decentralising services, so there's no reason why they can't be in other parts of the country. Apparently some stuff's been stored in Wanganui and the building leaks, so I would have thought fix the leaks would have been quite a pragmatic
All right,
approach.
Ben Thomas, what are your thoughts or a comment?
Well, I saw an excerpted list of some of the books that they were getting rid of, and they were things like, a paperback copy of Thomas Hobbes's Leviathan from 1978. And, obviously in the past it was necessary to have all of these books on hand in terms of paper copies for people to look at and research. But, a vast amount of this stuff is online now. And I think Chris knows that I think he's one of the greatest New Zealand statesmen, that he has an outstanding legacy in the past government. But I think ever since he started hanging out with Helen Clark in his retirement on that Radio New Zealand concert nonsense, he's really gone off the rails.
Well, I know that you're an aficionado of Mike Hosking, but I really do think I commend you when you're eating salads and good wholesome breakfasts, muesli. You should be listening to Concert FM. Ben, I'm disgusted with you.
All right, well, we'll leave this high-level dust-up for another time. Chris Finlayson, thank you very much for your time.
Okay,
I appreciate it. There you go.
Politest shade-throwing ever.
So you've been put in your place there. Quite frankly there, Ben Thomas, but on a more serious note, this National Library, 600,000 books, is it elitist, or do we really need to actually, does a good garden need a good weeding?
Like I said, the list of, and maybe this was selective, but the list of titles that I saw were not, impossible to replace unique taonga. They were just old books that that are not in short supply around the place, and you could probably free up some space.
I also kind of like the idea, because they're originally going to go to a Lion sale, right? Like, you're going to be able to buy them secondhand. I kind of like that idea that you could stumble along to your average junk sale and then be like, I actually wanted to read the Leviathan. That's great. There's a copy in there.
Now, finally, on a quick fire note, before we round out the show, gender reveal parties when expecting parents throw a celebration to reveal the baby's biological sex to friends and family have drawn criticism for late for being culturally outdated. So the traditional method of reveal was cutting into a cake, which was either blue or pink on the inside, indicating the impending arrival of a boy or a girl. And I'm just thinking, what do you think of these gender reveal parties? Are they outdated, or are they a little bit of fun? Around the panel, Verity Johnson.
I think it's just a little bit of bougie excess, to be honest. I mean, if you want to take a punt at them and have a go, you can. But I mean, realistically, you should also have a go at activewear and lilac lattes and just the whole cohort. It's just middle class excess, and it's not particularly harmless.
I just can't see the point. What's the big deal about knowing whether it's a boy or a girl, Ben Thomas?
That's right. It's just I'm glad that people have babies. It's very important for the world. But a baby shower's enough. A first birthday, whatever. We don't need to add more events.
Yeah, right. And Emmett says we need more copies of the Brothers Karamazov. Ben Thomas, Verity Johnson, thank you for being with me. I'm back tomorrow, 3:45. See you then.
Whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irarangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. Haere aki nei, Judith Collins goes full crusher on the campaign trail while sidestepping ghosts of leadership past. Jacinda Ardern takes a boat ride and sinks the hopes and dreams of the Greens. And a minister bets his job on Labour's tax policy. Well, welcome to the final countdown. Time's running out for Cantabrians who claim cash for botched repairs to unsold properties. Grieving parents whose son was killed in a boating accident appealed to Jacinda Ardern for kindness and entry to New Zealand. An Invercargill councillor likens the embattled council to the royal family, and the hot house heist. Investigators dig deep in the case of the missing exotic plants. RNZ News at 5. Kia ora, ko Susana Leata tēnei. Judith Collins is on the defensive again, denying that one of her own MPs is undermining her. The National Party leader yesterday described obesity as a weakness and said people who are obese need to take some personal responsibility. Mr Mitchell, who's Nationals MP for Rodney, told Newstalk ZB this morning that's partly true, but the issue is more complicated than that. Ms Collins says Mr Mitchell's view of obesity does not differ from hers. He just communicated it in a different way.
I think I'm very focused, as everybody, on getting up the party vote and doing the very best we can, hopefully winning government on Saturday.
Judith Collins says she has seen many people deal with obesity and it is important not to tell people they can't take charge of their weight. The Green Party says its proposed wealth tax will be a top priority in any post-election coalition negotiations with Labour, despite Labour repeatedly ruling the idea out. Labour's leader Jacinda Ardern said again today that such a tax would not be introduced on her watch. But the Greens co-leader Marama Davidson says nothing is off the table.
We're waiting for an election, so nothing is shut down because the people have not voted, and we are simply appealing to people who understand that we cannot continue to see the housing inequality that is happening for people who cannot even find a place to put down roots, let alone buy a home.
Marama Davidson says New Zealand also cannot continue to see people struggling on incomes that entrench poverty. 6 people have been arrested and assets worth $5 million seized as part of a major money laundering investigation. The police's financial crime group today searched 6 Auckland properties, and Detective Superintendent Ian Chapman says a variety of expensive and flashy assets were seized.
A Lamborghini Huracan worth $450,000, G-Wagon, a Mercedes G-Wagon worth around $280,000, a Ray Glass boat, various vehicles and high-end motorcycles.
Ian Chapman says the 4 men and 2 women arrested are professional money launderers. All are due to appear in the Auckland District Court charged with money laundering offences. A former private secretary to the Māori King has been spared a prison sentence for fraud. Rangi Whakaruru falsified invoices for King Tuheitia and stole more than $100,000, spending $27,000 of it on weight loss surgery. In the Auckland District Court today, Judge Emma Atkin ordered him to do 12 months home detention and 300 hours community work and pay $115,000 in reparation and legal costs. She said it would be unfair to jail a 57-year-old with no criminal history and a low chance of reoffending.
The process of arrest and charge coming before the court, conviction and sentence, the fall from grace, the attendant publicity, the period of time over which you have waited since your plea of guilty until today. In my view, those process factors play a significant part in holding you accountable.
Judge Emma Atkin. The names of 2 people charged over donations to the New Zealand First Foundation are now unlikely to be revealed before the election. An urgent appeal against a suppression order protecting their identities has been dismissed by Justice Jagos in the High Court in Auckland. Annika Smith reports.
The Serious Fraud Office says the pair obtained more than $700,000 between 2015 and 2020 and used this money to pay New Zealand First expenses. RNZ, Stuff, NZME and TVNZ had argued the public have a right to know the names before the polls close on Saturday. Having lost that argument in the District Court last week, they sought to win it on appeal today. At the end of the hearing, however, Justice Jagos dismissed the appeal. Ko Annika Smith aho.
It's 4 minutes past 5. The Springboks' participation in the upcoming Rugby Championship in Australia is looking less and less likely. Governing body SANZAR says South African Rugby has been given an additional 48 hours to finalise its decision. The extension delays the Springboks' scheduled departure to Australia. The players have had little rugby under their belts this year because of COVID-19. All Blacks assistant coach John Plumtree isn't confident the Springboks will make it.
The disappointing thing was that they couldn't get their Curry Cup going quick enough. So the longer that got delayed, the harder it was always going to be for them to get match hardened, match ready. They just didn't have the time. And obviously they're the world champions as well. So to come down here, if they don't feel like they're ready, they're not going to put that on the line.
Meanwhile, several top All Blacks are in doubt for Sunday's second test against the Wallabies in Auckland. Sam Whitelock sat out today's training with concussion symptoms. Richie Mo'unga has a sore shoulder and Beauden Barrett is still battling an Achilles injury. The Kiwi League team halfback Sean Johnson will spend 9 months on the sidelines. The Cronulla Sharks playmaker has had surgery on a ruptured Achilles he suffered in the penultimate round of the NRL last month. The 3-week Giro d'Italia cycle race is on the brink of cancellation. 5 teams have been hit by COVID-19 cases, and 12 days before the finish in Milan, Australian team Mitchelton Scott and Dutch outfit Jumbo-Visma have both pulled out. That's the news.
The mood of the campaign.
She came out with the claim that Jacinda Ardern had lied about staff border testing. So it looked quite desperate stuff, I think, from Judith Collins, clearly under pressure.
Is it saving the furniture?
I think that when you start accusing a party leader who has very high favourability ratings, you're really trying to appeal to that conservative base.
And Trump offers a little love to his supporters.
I'll kiss the guys and the beautiful women and everybody. I'll just give you a big fat kiss.
Desperate much? Morning Report, weekdays from 6 on air and online.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. Northland to Taumaranui, also Coromandel and Bay of Plenty. Mainly fine tonight, cloudy periods and isolated showers tomorrow. Gisborne, Hawke's Bay and Taihape. Rain from this evening, easing to showers tomorrow. Snow possible to 1,000 metres in Taihape and 700 metres in Hawke's Bay early tomorrow. Taranaki to Kapiti, also Taupo. Rain spreading from the south this evening, then easing to isolated showers overnight. Mainly fine tomorrow. Wellington, Wairarapa and Marlborough, patchy rain, then a few showers and fine breaks from tonight. Becoming fine in western Marlborough tomorrow morning. Nelson to Westland, fine apart from isolated showers. Canterbury to Southland, also Fiordland. Showers, but rain for inland Canterbury tonight and snow lowering to 400 metres. Showers gradually clearing from South Canterbury southwards tomorrow. Chatham Islands, cloudy periods and a few showers. RNZ National at 7 minutes past 5.
Thanks, Susanna. Kia ora, this is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. In the closing days of the election campaign, Judith Collins is desperately trying to turn National's prospects around, making a late notice visit to one of the country's bellwether seats. Her efforts, though, have again been stymied by her MPs talking out of turn. Here's our Deputy Political Editor, Craig McCulloch.
3 months into the job and 3 sleeps till campaign's end, Judith Collins is battling to turn around the polls.
Are we so pathetic? Are we sheep or are we people? I think we're people.
That was her pitch to superannuitants in Hamilton. Don't follow the flock. National still has a chance.
There is a choice, because we ain't Labour light. We're National. Please vote National 2 ticks blue for our excellent MPs.
Good luck, Judith.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Well said, Judith.
Thank you.
Thank you all the way.
Yeah, absolutely.
But while the mostly grey-haired audience showered Ms Collins with praise, indeed gave her a standing ovation, even her most die-hard fans had a certain sense of resignation.
I think we might be stuck with tax centre for another 3 years, unfortunately.
It's going to be very difficult. National have come on the back foot in the last few months. It's been very hard to sort of catch up.
I think it's hard. They're fighting an uphill battle.
The other person has got so much limelight over the last 12 months. The election's at the wrong time of the year to get an honest answer from what New Zealand would want.
Even National's Tim McIndoe, one of the local MPs, was heard remarking to a constituent that he might be looking for a new job next week.
Well, I'm aware of the fact I have a very tight contest, but I'm optimistic and I'll continue working as hard as I can right through to 11:59. Yes. Hamilton West is always a contest to watch.
Yep, it's always a tough seat.
Hamilton West is often called a bellwether seat. Its local MP has nearly always come from the largest party. If that trend continues, Mr McIndoe is in trouble. It's one reason why Judith Collins is in town, shoring up support.
I have 2 sisters living here, for goodness sake. I have my great niece turned up today to support me. You know, it's important.
She was originally set to visit Tauranga today, but abruptly changed plans late last week. She has not visited the city at all this campaign. Instead, the local MPs, Simon Bridges and Todd Muller, National's ghosts of leadership past, have been left to fend for themselves.
I wasn't close at all to what her program is, and I'm completely relaxed, quite frankly.
Look, I've visited Tauranga many times over the years. We can't be everywhere every time.
It wasn't the only distraction for Ms Collins today. Her comments about obesity this week are still drawing flack. On Tuesday, she described it as a weakness for which people must take personal responsibility. Health and nutrition experts say that's lazy victim blaming, and one of her own MPs, Mark Mitchell, openly disagreed with her on News Talk ZB.
Obesity, is it a personal choice as Judith claims?
No, I think it's more, well, it's part of it's a personal choice, but it's a lot more complex than that.
I saw what he said. I didn't think he different from my view much at all, actually. I thought it was he just said it in a different way.
And then Judith Collins doubled down.
There are times when you sort of let things loose a bit, and that is actually not great for us, and we do need to take charge.
It's a baffling topic to be focused on just days from an election and smacks of ill judgment. Labour has been more than happy to capitalise.
This just shows that Judith Collins has taken the National Party in a different direction, and perhaps not all of her team agree with her.
Do you know what I think is amazing? Is that Miss Ardern thinks she's an expert on the National Party. Thank you.
An expert might come in handy. 3 days till the election's over. Time's running out for Judith Collins. From Hamilton for Checkpoint, Craig McCulloch.
And Labour leader Jacinda Ardern is accusing National of desperate politicking as Judith Collins again doubles down on her wealth tax attack line. Despite Ms Ardern repeatedly ruling it out, Ms Collins says a Labour Greens government would see a wealth tax introduced. Ms Ardern was courting voters in Christchurch today and says it's incredibly disappointing that 3 days out from the election, she is having to fend off a tax rooted in fiction. Here's political reporter Yvette McCullough.
Jacinda Ardern kicking off her day in Christchurch, boarding a boat during a visit to Hamilton Jet.
Would have saved a few fishermen in their time in shallow waters.
On the home stretch of her bid to keep captaining the ship. But today, National leader Judith Collins was again trying to rock the boat with her wealth tax attack.
Because we know she wants a capital gains tax. We know that. That's what she campaigned on last election. She made a captain's call, she said. The only ship I'd put her in charge of would be the Labour Party ship, not a real ship. But a pirate, did you say, madam? Oh, I couldn't possibly say that.
Obviously, I've already ruled it out. The fact that the opposition continue to raise it is unfortunately a desperate tactic in the closing days of the campaign.
Ms Collins laughing off being labelled desperate.
Did she really? Oh, she shouldn't go into name calling. Yeah.
Do you really think that James Shaw could get a wealth tax across the line?
Well, he certainly seems to think so, doesn't he? And Chloe Swarbrick does.
Green MP Chloe Swarbrick today walked back comments she made to media suggesting Ms Ardern was being disingenuous and that there were ongoing discussions about the Greens walking away if a wealth tax isn't on the table.
I think what you'll find there is that was Ryan Bridge putting words into my mouth. I made it incredibly clear that what we are doing is focusing on our top key priorities this election.
But today, Ms Collins floated the prospect of James Shaw becoming Deputy Prime Minister and sneaking in a wealth tax if he had to step up as Acting Prime Minister. She also raised concern about Marama Davidson potentially being second in command.
Deputy Prime Ministership of Marama Davidson would be challenging, I think, for the country. She says that tax is love. That says it all, really.
You said that they didn't really pay taxes before entering Parliament. What did you mean by that?
Oh, well, most of them are unemployable, I was thought.
And the Green Party?
Oh, a whole lot of them, yep. Don't wish to be nasty, but there we go. It's the truth.
It wasn't just Ms Ardern batting away wealth tax questions. One of her deckhands, Revenue spokesperson Stuart Nash, trying to shut down the narrative on News Talk ZB this morning.
We are not going to implement a wealth tax. Read my lips. If we implement a wealth tax,
read your
I will
lips.
resign
Read my lips,
from
Stuart.
Cabinet.
Ms Ardern says this isn't a sign that Labour is concerned National's attack line is actually getting cut through.
No, that's an acknowledgement of the fact that we are having to deal with the desperation and misinformation of the National Party.
On the streets of Christchurch today, Ms Ardern was once again mobbed by adoring fans.
Could we get a photo with you, please?
Oh, God.
I'm so excited.
Can I give you a hug?
Oh, of course you can. Can I get a picture? That would be absolutely incredible. Ooh, I'm like shaking.
And there was the obligatory stop at the gelato store. whose flavour poll has her and Ms Collins tied and David Seymour in the lead.
Coalition with David, maybe?
I think the politest thing I could say is that s'mores make a nice ice cream.
With just 3 days to go, Ms Ardern will be feeling hopeful that her real-life popularity and all the selfies translate into votes. In Christchurch for Checkpoint, Yvette McCullough.
It's 5:15 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Keen for your feedback on what's going on the election campaign, 3 days out from election day. You can text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Who do you believe? And by the way, we'll be talking to the Green Party co-leader James Shaw just before the 6 o'clock news. A grieving family's appeal for Jacinda Ardern to show some kindness and let them sail to New Zealand after their son was fatally injured in Tahiti appears to have been heard. 14-year-old Eddie Jarman was struck and killed in August while snorkelling near his family's yacht in French Polynesia. The family of 4 from England was sailing the world when tragedy struck. New Zealand was always their end destination and they were prepared to wait out the pandemic. But since their son's death, they're desperate to get here, sell their boat and head home, grieve and try and get their lives back together. Eddie's parents, Barbara Gender and Harry Jarman's initial application for a border exemption on humanitarian grounds was turned down by our authorities because the couple has already managed to repatriate their son's body. Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern's since asked the Ministry of Health to review that decision. We spoke to the family from their yacht a couple of hours ago.
It's been just over 9 weeks. We're close to 10 weeks after Eddie died. It never gets easier. We are trying to make sense of a new normal, but that will take a long time. But also coping with the uncertainty at the moment, it's trying to adjust, trying to make new plans, and it's all of that is quite obviously challenging for us. Before the accident, we knew that the challenges were there, the uncertainty of COVID and borders was there, but we were, as a unit, we were a family, and we could face a lot more. Now, with being saddened and laden with the grief, a lot of things are a lot more difficult and a lot more challenging.
What would you like to happen? Is it that you want to bring the boat to New Zealand where you will be able to sell it? What is the best case scenario for you both now?
Best case scenario is to find a buyer wherever. Before the accident, we've already had appointed in July a sales agent because that was our plan, and despite the COVID we pursued the plan of a sale of the boat. The agents which we chose carefully are based in New Zealand, and we've researched the market. We decided that that's the destination we'd like to take, and that's the best market for our boat. We accepted that it won't be a quick sale. It will be challenging because people won't be able to travel. We hoped for relaxation of rules, just like every other cruiser out here in South Pacific. Towards November, October, there will be some concession to people who, not by their choice, but they've had their options cut to stay where we are and nowhere else because all other borders are closed. But as I said, there was no huge urgency. We accepted that if we have to wait out until next year before coming to New Zealand, that was it. However, the world has changed tremendously for us in the last 10 weeks. And that patience and that acceptance is difficult to face. It is difficult to be on the boat with Eddie being everywhere, really reminding us, and we just feel, no one can tell you how you can feel. No one can tell you what's the right thing to do. But we feel that the best way for our daughter primarily would be to return to her school back in the UK, and to be able to do that, we really need mass must sell our boat, which was our investment.
We sold our house to buy our boat, so it is our major asset, whereas most people's major asset might be their house. This is our major asset at the moment.
So, Harry, in terms of what the New Zealand authorities have said to you, you've made an application to come here. As I understand it, it's been declined. Why?
The reason was very short. Since we had been able to repatriate the body of our son to UK for burial, there is no. That was the reason, that they do not see that being any other reasons for us to
Essentially,
arrive.
they're saying, well, you can fly back to England if you need to, and it doesn't involve us, which is fine. But as I've explained, our major asset is our boat, and we can't just leave it here in a cyclone season.
I want you to understand that this is, we're not claiming this is a desperate situation which we are, in danger of our lives. What we hoped was that, given our situation and given Eddie's death, a little compassion perhaps could be shown to enable us to expedite the sale of the boat in New Zealand as urged by our broker, with whom we are under contract till end of January, and to be able to market it, and to also to acquire some sort of certainty that the boat is safe. I'm not saying it's not safe here, but we have to be on it.
Can you just explain why you would need to stay on the boat with the cyclone season approaching? Why is it necessary for you to stay with the boat?
Firstly, French Polynesia, with 280,000 people living in it, does not have adequate facilities to leave the boat. They only have 2 marinas. None of those marinas are designed to weather through heavy storms or cyclones. The cyclone danger is minimal. We have to stay with the boat because there is probably 300 to 400 boats in a similar situation to us in French Polynesia, which can't reliably move elsewhere. Some have moved out to Fiji, I think in hope that perhaps the rules will be relaxed in New Zealand and Australia at some point. But that brings them closer to the cyclone season, not further. And that would not certainly be an option for us, nor anyone who has thought about it and planned for it. We have to stay with the boat because it is our home, and we have to sail it to a more secure area, which is further east of Tahiti, where we currently are.
Barbara, are you asking, for a little bit of kindness, and would you like the New Zealand Prime Minister to reconsider your case?
Yes, I think that's what I'm asking. I'm not asking for blank opening borders. I'm not asking for letting a particular group of people in. That's not why we applied. We applied so our plight could be eased. A little bit of kindness. But I believe that the Prime Minister has been made aware of our case, and it is considering it. So it would be great to see that little sparkle of hope for us to rebuild our lives and to move on from this terrible tragedy we found ourselves in.
And that is Barbara Gender and Harry Jarman speaking from their boat near Tahiti. A stoush is brewing over the lack of activity in Auckland's CBD. Oh, actually, just before we move to that story, we've just got to hand a statement from the Ministry of Health on this matter. They say the Ministry of Health is looking into the Jarman's case, and we will bring you more details as we get them. Now, let's move on to the Auckland CBD. A stoush is brewing over the lack of activity in Auckland's CBD post-lockdown. The City Centres Business Association has attacked Auckland Council, claiming it's not doing enough to get its workers back into the CBD and supporting the local economy. Heart of the City says while the government has urged workers to head back to their city offices. Auckland Council hasn't followed suit. But the new work from home culture isn't the only thing hurting CBD businesses. Reporter Nick Trubridge and cameraman Nick Monroe have the story.
It's a central city standoff. Auckland Business Association, heart of the city, taking a swipe at Auckland Council for not doing all it can to help spur the CBD's post-lockdown resurgence. Chief Executive Viv Beck says over the past couple of months, inner city spending is down $100 million compared to the same period last year. And she says it's vital those in the public sector flood back to their city offices instead of working from home to help the city's cafes and restaurants recover.
We asked both council and the government to ensure that the messaging was there to bring people back.
And the government responded. Here's Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern back on June 8 on the government's role in ensuring the country's CBDs thrive post-lockdown.
For our part, we've asked the State Services Commission to issue new workplace guidance to make it clear that every public sector worker should return to their usual place of work, taking into account flexible work policies.
So some action from the government, but Beck says she's still waiting on the same from Auckland Council.
The government certainly did make that point clear. We haven't seen the same approach from Auckland Council, and we're very disappointed in that.
Beck says she's raised the issue of council staff returning to their CBD offices at numerous meetings and in public statements. She also says she's raised the matter with Mayor Phil Goff and former Chief Executive Stephen Town.
We think they should be taking a leadership role on this and ensuring that their ratepayer-funded staff are back supporting the economy, because it will be a much bigger impact if they don't do that.
And despite Heart of the City's concerns, Auckland Council isn't doing everything it can to give the CBD a much-needed boost. There are other reasons people are staying away.
Aucklanders say there's something else keeping them out of the centre city. It's all of this. Plenty of roadworks, and with it, plenty of road cones and plenty of traffic jams. And there's no end in sight anytime soon.
Checkpoint has heard from numerous residents who say they don't bother with the city anymore due to disruptions in the form of these widespread roadworks. Auckland CBD-based property manager Clem Andreeve told us his customers don't want to come into town for meetings or to drop off things like keys. That's because it's simply too difficult due to the constant streetscape changes and the lack of parking.
I have to go somewhere nearby suburbs just to meet with them in a cafe somewhere there, and not in the cafes in Auckland Central.
Andreeve says he's had 2 recent meetings where his clients have wanted to meet in Kingsland and Mount Eden, taking potential business for central city coffee shops elsewhere. So while Auckland's second lockdown is a thing of the past, the city of sails has turned into the city of snails as it struggles to regain its usual hustle and bustle. For Checkpoint, Nick Trubridge.
And we have contacted Auckland Council for a response but haven't had a reply as yet. And if you were listening to that on radio and you want to check out the City of Snails, we will put the video up online for you. The man who defrauded a charitable trust linked to the Māori King to pay for weight loss surgery has avoided jail and been sentenced to home detention. Rangi Whakaruru was the King's trusted private secretary, but over a year he defrauded a trust of over $100,000 by writing false invoices. The 57-year-old was today sentenced and, due to his previous good character and commitment to paying reparation, avoided jail time. Jordan Bond was in court.
Rangi Whakaruru defrauded the charitable trust which funds King Tuheitia, which is funded by the Waikato Tainui iwi. He had weight loss surgery at a cost of $27,000 and got the trust to pay for it by pretending it was a cost of the King's medical care. The 57-year-old also invoiced the trust for $80,000 by claiming the King had to pay for care at a private hospital, but which was actually done at no cost to the King under the public health system. The lawyer for the Serious Fraud Office, Todd Simmons, says all up $110,000 was effectively stolen from the iwi for Whakaruru's own personal gain.
And of course the harm in a case like this goes much
beyond pure financial loss. It goes to significant harm caused to the reputation and the mana of the iwi and the kingitanga.
Mr Simmons says once Whakaruru was caught, he lied to the SFO, trying to cover his tracks. He ended up pleading guilty to 6 charges in December last year and has been on bail since. The defence lawyer, Guyon Foley, says Whakaruru admits the offending and holds deep shame over it. He produced to the judge 10 letters of support, which spoke of his good character.
A number of the writers note the defendant's embarrassment and shame, deep shame. And the writers ask for mercy.
Mr Foley says Whakaruru had no previous offending, was committed to rehabilitation and can immediately pay back almost all of the money he defrauded. In sentencing, Judge Emma Aitken said this offending damaged the reputation of the King and was not fraud of need, but greed.
This was a very gross breach of trust by someone who held the role of as principal private secretary to King Tuheitia. And you clearly used your position, your mana, your standing and your years of service to obtain significant personal benefits to yourself.
The maximum sentence for the charge of obtaining by deception is 7 years. However, Judge Aitken, referencing case law, said it would be unfair for Whakaruru to be jailed at 57 years old with no criminal history and a low chance of reoffending.
The process of arrest and charge, coming before the court, conviction and sentence, the fall from grace, the attendant publicity, the period of time over which you have waited since your plea of guilty until today. In my view, those process factors play a significant part in holding you accountable and promoting a sense of responsibility.
The judge sentenced Whakaruru to 12 months home detention, 300 hours of community work, and ordered him to pay $115,000 in reparation and costs. Outside of court, the King's former spokesperson, Tuku Morgan, said Whakaruru should have been jailed as he had trampled all over the mana of the kingitanga.
There's but one saying that he will carry is whakama, the ultimate shame. That will be his ever-present companion for the rest of his life. He will have to carry whakama and total embarrassment for what he has done to Waikato Tainui, to the kingitanga, and to tribal members like me, who thought that we could trust them, but we were completely wrong.
Whakaruru was ordered to drive directly to the address he was serving home detention at and would be fitted with an electronic monitoring bracelet. I Tamaki Makoto for Checkpoint, called Jordan Bond. Aho.
Coming up on Checkpoint on RNZ National, Green Party co-leader James Shaw joins us live from his party's final rally. The deep divisions in the Invercargill Council rear their ugly head again as one councillor likens them to the royal family. And mystery surrounds a heist of exotic and highly valuable plants. And just returning to our earlier story in the programme, our interview with the Jarman family on their yacht in French Polynesia. Their son Eddie died a few weeks ago and they're desperate to get to New Zealand. They've been denied an exemption to cross the border. The Ministry of Health says it's looking at this matter as a matter of urgency. They say we are still finalising what other options, if any, might be available to the family. And they go on to say we can't say any more at this stage as we have not yet corresponded with the family. We'll bring you more details as we have them. But if you'd like to get in touch about anything you've heard on the programme this evening, the text is 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or there's always the email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Time for the headlines now with Susanna.
Judith Collins denies she's been undermined by MP Mark Mitchell over her comments, which said obesity is a weakness. Mr Mitchell told Newstalk ZB this morning that's partly true, but the issue is more complicated. Ms Collins says their views don't differ. They've just been communicated differently. Despite a wealth tax being repeatedly ruled out by Labour, the Green Party says it will be a top priority in any coalition negotiations. Greens co-leader Marama Davidson says nothing is off the table and the country cannot continue to experience the housing inequality that's seeing people struggling to put down roots. An urgent appeal by media organisations to name the 2 people charged in connection with donations to the New Zealand First Foundation has been dismissed by the High Court. It means their names are unlikely to be revealed before the election. RNZ, Stuff, NZME and TVNZ had argued the public have a right to know the names before the polls close on Saturday. 4 men have been arrested today after the death of a 21-year-old in an Auckland park earlier this month. Acting Detective Inspector Warwick Adkins says the investigation continues into Nigel Fuatimu's death in Manurewa's Jellicoe Park on the 3rd of October. 6 people have been arrested and assets worth $5 million seized as part of a year-long investigation into money laundering. The police's financial crime group has today raided 6 Auckland properties. 7 luxury vehicles, including a Lamborghini Huracan worth $450,000, were among the vehicles seized. Online trading sites are being closely monitored after a dozen plants, some worth thousands of dollars, were stolen from the main glasshouse of Wellington's Botanic Gardens. It's the latest in a string of such thefts, likely motivated by huge prices for houseplants online. A Trade Me spokesperson says the site has a team dedicated to weeding out dodgy traders. Those are the latest news headlines on RNZ National. Our next news and weather update is at 6.
Thanks, Susanna. Kia ora anō. This is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. Let's get to the business news now with Giles Beckford, who is in our Wellington studio. Giles, ACC bills are arriving and for some folk they're pretty weighty, are they?
They could well be. There might be a bit of a shock because ACC actually hasn't sent out a bill for the past year or so. They were changing their system from where they assess levies from forecast earnings to actual earnings. And then the pandemic got in the way, and so they delayed sending out the bills as well. They're now starting to come into people's mailboxes, and you've got some considerable bills there. It will be a bit of a shock. So, it's a warning. Don't be surprised when your ACC bill turns up. This is, of course, for self-employed people. And for some people, it might be a bit of a shock also in what they have to pay and what they're being assessed on. And the circumstances are that if you change your jobs, or you have changed your jobs, and it may be that, for instance, you're a studio-bound business editor working for a radio company, self-employed, and then all of a sudden you have a hankering to become a building contractor and you take up an apprenticeship. ACC will now assess you at the riskiest job that you have. In other words, they'll assess you at the risk of being a building contractor, which one figures is probably a bit more dangerous than being a business editor. And so from that point of view, it will be a bit of a shock when you find that your final assessment, or what you have to pay, is actually assessed at that more dangerous occupation. So a warning there to folk. The financial services company Henry, which helps people file their ACC levies, claims and statements, saying the system needs to be changed. It needs to be able to take account of when people change their types of work, rather than just being actually hit by the most dangerous one, even though they might actually only, say, do 2 or 3 months in that year. But just be warned, forewarned, forearmed.
And Giles, Mainfreight, the trucking company that keeps on trucking, what news do you bring of them?
Well, anybody who has shares in their KiwiSaver investment somewhere along the line will surely be a part owner of Mainfreight. It is a company which just goes from strength to strength. Just when we thought that the pandemic would have knocked the stuffing out of a lot of transport links, supply chains are being disrupted, Mainfreight says we're actually doing very nicely. We're seeing an increase in revenue, up around 9%. They're forecasting that their first half profit could be up, this is their operating profit, I should say, could be up by as much as a quarter. From that point of view, this is a company which doesn't just truck, it doesn't take just your parcels from A to B. It's also getting significantly into warehousing. So companies who have got a lot of stock are actually leaving it with Mainfreight to look after for them, and then they pick it up and it gets transported to where they want it, which means that Mainfreight, of course, is looking to build more warehouses and looking for more land. So a significant part for them. Australia and Asia doing well for them, a bit more subdued in the US and Europe, and New Zealand ticking over quite nicely. But that's one reason why the company is up 6%. The shares are up 6% today, cracking through the $51 level.
And what about the rest of the market, Giles?
Well, I thought that finally that we would see a bit of the froth blown off the investment pint this morning. It was looking a bit on the soft side. But no, it's come back with, I won't say a hiss and a roar, but come back solidly this afternoon. Top 50 up 90 points. That's about 0.75%, going through that 12,500 level for the top 50. As for the currency, 66.6 US cents and 92.9 Australian.
Thanks, Giles. That's Giles Beckford joining us from our Wellington studio with business news. Let's head to the US now, and in their election, early voting is underway in several more states. An unprecedented number of voters have already cast their ballots, and with every passing day, states all over the country are witnessing record early voter turnout. President Trump returned to the campaign trail in Florida on Monday night, and Joe Biden has also been in the Sunshine State over the last few hours. Meanwhile, in Washington, the president's nominee to succeed Ruth Bader Ginsburg on the Supreme Court has spent another day on the witness stand at her confirmation hearing. Our US correspondent Simon Marks reports.
Election Day is officially Tuesday, November the 3rd, but in reality for most of the country, the election is already happening. Early voting has now begun in 40 separate states, and the numbers are staggering. More than 10 million Americans have already cast their ballots. Texas was one state where you could vote starting on Tuesday morning. NBC reporter Priscilla Thompson was observing the scene at dawn at Houston's NRG Arena.
Cars have been lined up here at NRG since 5 a.m., and you might be able to see some headlights back there. Those are going all the way back to the freeway.
In Kentucky, voters started queuing up at 3 a.m. There were astonishing scenes in Georgia. Some voters waited 12 hours on Monday to get to the front of the line so they could have their say. In South Carolina, LaTosha Brown is getting the vote out for a group called Black Voters Matter.
We are out here in Charleston, South Carolina. We're bringing them in. We want folks to know that today they can actually early vote. So please tell your friends we got free food out here. Got the best lobster macaroni that you want to taste. So anyway, come join us.
Lobster macaroni and a say in the future of the country. What is propelling all of this? Anxiety about COVID-19? A desire to end America's national nightmare? Or a determination to give Donald Trump 4 more years? We don't know, but we do know in Florida on Monday night, the president almost had to be restrained in his first appearance outside Washington since he beat COVID-19.
Now they say I'm immune. I feel so powerful. I'll walk into that audience. I'll walk in there. I'll kiss everyone in that audience. I'll kiss the guys and the beautiful women and everybody. I'll just give you a big fat kiss.
His rally in Florida was another desperately wasted opportunity. You're in a crucial swing state where you are 4 points behind your rival. You know you must win Florida if you want 4 more years. You've got 2 choices: engage in a serious critique of your opponent, or grouse about the night you and the First Lady were disappointed when you sat down to watch television.
I told my wife, we're going to have a great time. We're going to watch television. I just got nominated for the Nobel Prize. And then I turned on the fake news. Story after story. Story after story, no mention.
There is no evidence that any undecided voters anywhere are going to make their decision in this election based on whether the president's Nobel Peace Prize nomination was sufficiently covered on television. Later in the speech, he went after Hillary Clinton again over her emails, as though that's going to have any impact in the battle to defeat Joe Biden. And speaking of Mr. Biden, here he was on Monday in Ohio.
We have to come together. That's why I'm running. I'm running as a proud Democrat for the Senate.
Except he's running for president. The words roll off the tongue after 47 years in Washington, admittedly, but the gaffes are once again concerning some Democrats. On Capitol Hill, Judge Amy Coney Barrett spent the day defending her record as she seeks to fill the Supreme Court seat vacated by the death of Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and trying to soothe the concern of Democrats that as soon as she gets on the court, she's going to strike down the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, in a case before the bench next month.
Your concern is that because I critiqued the statutory reasoning that I'm hostile to the ACA, and I assure you that I am not. I apply the law, I follow the law, you make the policy.
Democrats aren't buying it, but they don't have the votes to stop her from reaching the court. One member of the Judiciary Committee took a pause from proceedings to write a tweet directed at the president. Senator Chuck Grassley, a Republican veteran, urged the president to focus in the 3 weeks ahead, advising him to use an index card when he makes speeches with 5 short sentences on his accomplishments and the 5 things that differentiate himself from Joe Biden. Like many Republicans, he seems to worry that time is running out for Donald Trump to save this election, and the polls suggest he may be right. For Checkpoint, I'm Simon Marks in Washington.
Across Europe, more and more countries are imposing stricter coronavirus rules to try to curb a surge in cases. The Netherlands is the latest. They've announced a partial lockdown for the next 4 weeks. The Czech Republic has a new 3-week state of emergency. Schools are now closed. Germany has seen relatively low numbers in the past few weeks, but there's still concern there, and an 11 p.m. curfew has been introduced. And in Spain, there's now a state of emergency in Madrid, where the police are patrolling neighbourhoods to stop people from leaving their homes, as the BBC's Jean McKenzie reports.
This is an early night by Spanish standards. Last orders now at 10 o'clock, and no one is allowed to leave or enter the city unless it's essential. But with the rules chopping and changing for weeks, people are tired and confused.
All the time we're breaking the rules, and nobody cares. Like, even the police, they don't say anything.
Very soon after Spain reopened, cases surged, giving Madrid the highest levels of coronavirus in Europe. Yet thousands have come out to protest against the latest measures. Many are angry their sacrifices have been squandered. People in Madrid are fed up. They've already been through the strictest lockdown in Europe, and here they are again with their movement being restricted. They want instead for the government to be focusing more on other measures to control the virus, so more tracing, more testing, more doctors. A couple of weeks ago, only some neighbourhoods were locked down, the poorer, more overcrowded ones, including Elena's.
They were trying to make a line and divide the city with the poor people, the contagious people.
The national government intervened, concerned Madrid's politicians weren't doing enough, and imposed the state of emergency against their will. Now it's a political war.
They're creating a lot of confusion, and we have been days like, I don't know, what can I do tomorrow? I don't know if I can do this, I don't know if I can do that. I think that is the main problem. And second of all, I think we cannot last this for a long time. The solution cannot be the lockdown.
But getting Spaniards to eat before their 10 p.m. curfew is a tall order. Tonight, many restaurants haven't even bothered to open. And Julian says they'll just continue the night back at his. As patience erodes, it's clear countries will need much more than just rules and restrictions.
And that was Jean McKenzie with that report. Now, returning to our earlier story about the CBD in Auckland and business concern that council is not encouraging workers back to the CBD. Well, we've had this statement in from Auckland Council, and it says, following the government's announcement last week that Auckland would be moving back to Alert Level 1, we have been encouraging our people to return to our buildings. Around half of our staff are based in the city centre. Many others work at our hubs around the region, and that is from the Auckland Council. It is 13 minutes to 6. I'm Lisa Owen, and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. The growing craze for exotic houseplants may be at the root of a spate of thefts from greenhouses and public gardens. Wellington's Botanic Garden is the latest target, with brazen thieves taking a dozen plants and cuttings from its famous begonia house. Tessa Guest reports.
The thieves came in the night and stole several exotic and highly valuable plants. Wellington Botanic Gardens manager David Soul says there was no sign of a forced entry.
So it was discovered on when the staff came in to work on Tuesday morning. They found material on the floor. The place is clean when they leave it each night. The doors are all locked externally and internally. So it was, at first they might have thought it was birds, but it was just a bit too much for birds, and started having a look around, and there were a number of plants missing.
It's a chilly Wellington day outside. But here, inside the begonia house, it's like stepping into the tropics. Long-time gardener Rachel Solomon is working in her short sleeves, plugging one of the holes left by the thieves with potted flowers. She says some of the stolen plants, which were more than 10 years old, will be hard to replace.
They're equally as hard for us to obtain and grow, so it can take time to grow to get to what we need to display as well. You know, they don't just go poof overnight and you've got an instant plant, which would be quite nice, hey?
The burglary has been reported to the police and staff are reviewing CCTV footage. David Soul says they're looking at extra security.
We're having another look at it now, and it's something we have been working on, and perhaps this is just brought a little more haste to make some decision making around that. Yes.
Mr. Soul is reluctant to say which plants have been taken because he doesn't want to encourage copycat crimes. There have been similar thefts around the country. Last month, a thief at Christchurch Botanic Gardens scaled a high safety glass window at the Orchard House to steal a rare variegated monstera. A council spokesperson says the gardens were in the process of having cameras installed in the glasshouse at the time of the theft, and they'll be operational later this month. Trade Me spokesperson Logan Mudge says the site has a number of tools to weed out dodgy traders and works closely with the police as required.
No one's 100% perfect, so if anyone out there who's an expert spots something, we encourage them to get in touch so we can take a look.
He says 2020 has been the year of the houseplant.
We've seen sales jump 235% on this time last year. Compared to 5 years ago, it's a 2,500% jump in the number of sales.
In August, a minima sold for more than $8,000, a Trade Me record for a houseplant. New Zealand Gardener magazine editor Joe McCarroll says the prices are crazy.
It's hard to believe it will continue at the rate of pace it has been, especially in terms of the prices. You've got plants changing hands now moderately regularly for the price of a second-hand car, which seems ridiculous to me as someone who really does love plants.
Joe McCarroll says the popularity of exotic houseplants on Instagram and other social media has a dark side. Back at the Begonia House, visitors were outraged to hear of the thefts.
It's a shocking business. Yes, it's so sad to take plants, and what will they do with them?
I think it's disgusting, quite frankly. It really is.
Get the perpetrators out and have them doing some work in the community to restore what they've done. Weeding.
Gardens manager David Soul says his message to the public is if they see anyone helping themselves to plants or cuttings, to please let staff know immediately. For Checkpoint, Tessa Guest.
Let's get to some of your feedback now. Some of you have been in touch about the deserted Auckland CBD. This listener says, I am a council worker and we have been encouraged to come into the office. We are also supporting local businesses in our own communities by working from home and reducing carbon by not travelling, not to mention well-being by managing better working flexibility. Another listener says there's certainly a lot happening in the central city right now, including the city rail link and all the prep to get the waterfront ready for the America's Cup, both of which will pour people and they're spending money into the city. Meanwhile, I'm curious, this listener says, about how the business associations in Kingsland and Mount Eden and coffee shops in neighbourhoods where people are working from home feel about the uptick in their businesses as per the story. As long as people are carrying on with work, does it really matter which part of town they're in? I suppose it depends on where your business is, eh? And then this person says, sorry, but the CBD businesses need to accept and understand that people will continue to work from home. This is the best chance we have for future emissions curbing. Traffic infrastructure pressure is not what we need. Businesses in the CBD need to diverge, be creative and change. Change in capital letters with 2 exclamation marks. Time is nearly up for owners of unsold quake-damaged properties in Canterbury to apply to claim money for botched repairs. The government announced last year it would give an ex gratia payment to homeowners with properties that went over the Earthquake Commission's then cap of $100,000. Today is the last day for applications after the original August deadline was extended due to COVID-19. But there are calls to extend that deadline again as applications have flooded in over the past month. Our Christchurch reporter Anand Zaki has more.
Applications for the Onsols program have been open for 14 months, and the Earthquake Commission says it has received 4,000 applications so far. But there has been a late surge, with 1,500 of those coming over the past month. EQC's head of Onsols, Pip Andrews, says that is down to good promotions.
We have seen, probably in the last 8 weeks, quite a significant uptake in the number of applications, I think, due to the mail-out that we did recently.
The deadline has already been extended once from the original August date due to COVID, but Pip Andrews says there are no further extensions.
We have been running for 14 months now, so there's been an opportunity to make applications for that period of time. There won't be any extension to the current deadline, so I guess my message is get your application in today.
But Peter Woods, who's a partner at law firm Anthony Harper, says there needs to be more time. Mr Woods has led the EQC Group Action, made up of owners of quake-damaged properties who took EQC to the High Court. He says the unsold program is a good thing, but the deadline is unfair.
There'll be thousands of homes in Christchurch which were sold, and people are still trying to establish whether the EQC fix was right or not. There'll be loads of people who still don't even know they've got a problem.
Ellie Jones, who chairs the Claims Reference Group, applied for the unsolds process for her new home, which is found to be inadequately repaired. She says it has been a relatively smooth process, but isn't convinced more extensions are necessary. Ms Jones says there will always be people who discover damaged homes, or those who should have signed up to the program.
In 2-3 years' time, even in 6 months' time, people may go to sell their house. They bought it, they thought it was repaired, and find that there's hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of damage that needs repairing. I don't know how you nip that in the bud completely.
But Mel Burke, spokesperson for EQCFix.NZ, which is a group working to hold EQC to account, says the deadline should never have been in place.
I think Treasury and EQC fully understand the sheer scale of the mist damage and emissions and errors that are in Canterbury, and it is my opinion that by putting a deadline on it, it's potentially a way to attempt to limit what I would consider to be an enduring liability that they have to Canterbury.
Her advice to people is, if in doubt about applying for the unsold program, apply immediately. If anyone misses the date, she believes there will be a legal avenue to follow up. In a statement this afternoon, EQC Minister Grant Robertson ruled out extending the deadline for the program. Those who own unsold properties and have botched or missed earthquake repairs have until midnight tonight to lodge an application with the EQC. In Christchurch for Checkpoint, Anand Zaki.
A long-running dispute over an earthquake-prone building in Wellington has hit a legal snag. The Wellington City Council wants permission to strengthen the Adelaide Hotel because the owners refuse to. It's the first time a council has taken a building owner to court to get the power to seize a building and get it strengthened itself. But as Jonathan Mitchell reports, the issue's hit yet another speed bump.
The Heritage Building is on a busy stretch of Adelaide Road in Newtown and was meant to be earthquake strengthened by 2013. But 7 years on, it sits abandoned. The owners want to demolish it, but the council wants the court to give it the power to seize the building and strengthen it up to code. A hearing was scheduled to take place at the Wellington District Court this morning. However, when seated and ready to go, the lawyers for the building owners called for an immediate adjournment. Lawyer Kevin Smith said he'd come to the case very late.
Council have only recently been instructed. The Council were instructed on the 24th of September. It hasn't given the respondents' legal team the time that would normally be required to prepare for this hearing.
However, the judge reminded Mr Smith the case has been on the books since December last year, giving ample time for legal representation. Kevin Smith added it's a complicated case that needed to be prepared and worked through carefully.
This is law that hasn't been explored before in the New Zealand jurisdiction. There have been no other prior cases. It's not necessarily a simple law. It relies on Your Honour's discretion.
Judge Chris Tui then addressed the City Council's lawyers about whether the court has jurisdiction and the legal parameters. Lawyer Nick Whittington wants the court to grant an order that gives the City Council powers to seize and strengthen after many years of delays.
Now, the Council's position is that the work it is allowed to do, and which would be reasonable, is to do seismic work. The section provides that the council may do seismic work.
Judge Tui raised the suggestion that if the court granted an order, it could be for the council to undertake preliminary seismic assessments of the building and nothing more. He said it would then be up to the council to come up with a detailed plan of what needed to be done and the costs, which would need to be approved by another order. In any case, the judge granted an adjournment so the lawyers could file further submissions. They must be filed in the next fortnight before the hearing takes place on November the 2nd. In Wellington for Checkpoint, call Jonathan Mitchell-Aho.
And some of your feedback before the 6 o'clock news. On our earlier interview with the Jarmans, their son Eddie died at sea. They're stuck on a boat in Tahiti, want to come to New Zealand, but have been turned down. Lorraine says that poor family on the yacht should certainly be let into New Zealand to sell their boat and get themselves back to the UK. Their young daughter needs to get back to school. Unbelievable that their first application was turned down. Come on, Jacinda, says Lorraine. On the issue of a wealth tax, this listener says, I support a capital gains tax, but wouldn't support a tax on an asset like a house. For retirees, they might have wealth in their house but no income. Would this require the elderly to sell their houses to pay taxes?
RNZ News at 6, ngā mihi nui ko Susana Leatawa tēnei. Health experts have condemned Judith Collins' comments about obesity being a weakness, saying it is a complex health issue. The National Party leader said yesterday that people who are obese need to take some personal responsibility. An Auckland University professor of nutrition and global health, Boyd Swinburne, takes issue with that remark.
It's a very shallow and lazy way of thinking about obesity. Nobody in the whole obesity research area who has anything to do with it thinks that this is just a personal responsibility issue.
Boyd Swinburne says people are being saturated in an unhealthy food environment that requires government intervention. The US drug company Eli Lilly has suspended the late-stage trial of an experimental antibody treatment for COVID-19 because of an unspecified safety concern. Yesterday, another American company, Johnson & Johnson, said it was temporarily halting its coronavirus vaccine trial because of the unexplained illness of a participant. And AstraZeneca's vaccine trial remains on hold in the United States a month after a volunteer fell ill. Global organisations representing airlines and airports say the aviation industry faces collapse unless it gets further financial support, the BBC's Theo Leggett reports.
The figures are stark. Airlines and airports around the world are expecting their revenues to fall by more than $520 billion this year. At a joint press conference on Tuesday, the airline industry body IATA called on governments to provide more financial support. Previous aid packages, they said, had been designed on the assumption that a recovery would by now be underway. But without further assistance, many airlines would not survive the next few months, and airports could begin going bankrupt very soon. But it was also vital, they said, for governments to introduce coordinated testing of passengers to enable quarantine requirements to be removed.
Theo Leggett reporting. 4 men in their 20s have been arrested today in connection with the death of a 21-year-old man in a Manurewa park 11 days ago. Acting Detective Inspector Warwick Adkins says the 4 are all charged with assault and are due to appear in the Manukau District Court soon. He says the investigation continues into Nigel Fuatimu's death on a Saturday night in Jellicoe Park. Huntly residents are fighting an Auckland trucking company's plans to dump millions of cubic metres of industrial waste in the town. Residents are concerned that Gleeson and Cox's proposal for a new dump will ruin their nearby lake Puketirini, considered one of Waikato's most pristine lakes. The company argues it will only dump clean waste at the site, but a Huntly Community Board member, Red Wotton, is sceptical.
This outfit is talking about bringing in truckloads of stuff that come out of house sites, demolition sites and the likes. They're saying it'll all be screened before it gets there. Well, that's a load of trollop. There's no way in hell you're going to be able to screen 50 tonne of material every time it goes on a truck.
Red Wotton says locals benefit nothing from the company's presence in the town. A long-running dispute over an earthquake-prone building in Wellington has hit a snag. The City Council wants permission to strengthen the Adelaide Hotel because the owners refused to. A hearing was scheduled to take place at the Wellington District Court today, but lawyers for the owners called for an immediate adjournment. A lawyer, Kevin Smith, said he'd come to the case very late.
Council have only recently been instructed. The Council were instructed on the 24th of September. it hasn't given the respondents' legal team the time that would normally be required to prepare for this hearing.
Kevin Smith says it's a complicated case that needs to be worked through carefully. The judge granted an adjournment to early next month. It's almost 4 minutes past 6. Several top All Blacks are in doubt for Sunday's second Bledisloe Cup test against the Wallabies at Eden Park, including star first fives Richie Mo'unga and Beauden Barrett. Mo'unga has a sore shoulder and Barrett is battling an Achilles injury. Centurion lock Sam Whitelock is also racing to be fit after sitting out today's training with concussion symptoms. Assistant coach John Plumtree is hopeful Mo'unga will be right and Barrett too.
He played a small part in training today. We haven't caught up with the medical team yet. Looked like he was running pretty well. Richie had a little bit of a stinger in his shoulder, but nothing too much. Sam Whitelock, he had some headaches after the game, so he'll go through concussion protocol and we'll see how he gets on during the week.
John Plumtree. The Silver Ferns are breaking fitness testing records during a training camp in Wellington this week. Coach Nolene Taurua says the current crop of players are the fittest she's seen in a decade, with tactics mid-quarter Kimi Orapoi the standout. The Ferns have a domestic series next week to help them prepare for the return of international netball against England, and Taurua says starting spots are still to be secured.
We're actually at the best yo-yo that we've been for the last 10 years, so really happy about where the standard is physically. Now we just got to get that netball brain connected to court strategy out there and obviously the desire.
Nolene Taurua. That's the news.
Take the pulse of the day's news every weeknight at 10.
Well, we're in a low interest rate environment and they've obviously been able to access some funds. They've borrowed some money, which they can lend out at 1.99 and still make a profit on.
Live with local, national and international stories as they happen.
Nowhere would you go to the Punakaiki Pancake Rocks and not even pay $1 to walk that beautiful track.
Up to date if you're up late. Lately with Karen Hay every weeknight from 10 on RNZ National.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. Northland to Taumaranui, also Coromandel and Bay of Plenty. Mainly fine tonight, cloudy periods and isolated showers tomorrow. Gisborne, Hawke's Bay and Taihape rain from this evening, easing to showers tomorrow. Snow possible to 1,000 metres in Taihape and 700 metres in Hawke's Bay early tomorrow. Taranaki to Kapiti, also Taupo. Rain spreading from the south this evening, then easing to isolated showers overnight. Mainly fine tomorrow. Wellington, Wairarapa and Marlborough, patchy rain, then a few showers and fine breaks from tonight, becoming fine in western Marlborough tomorrow morning. Nelson to Westland, fine apart from isolated showers. Canterbury to Southland, also Fiordland, showers but rain for inland Canterbury tonight and snow lowering to 400 metres. Showers gradually clearing from South Canterbury southwards tomorrow. Chatham Islands, cloudy periods and a few showers. RNZ National, it's coming up to 7 minutes past 6.
Thanks, Susanna. Kia ora anō. This is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. Returning now to the story of the grieving UK family who are hoping to be granted an exemption to sail their yacht to New Zealand so they can sell it and move home. Having previously denied Barbara Gender and Harry Jarman's application, the Ministry of Health is now looking into their case as a matter of urgency. Lydia Batham's been speaking to the family who are currently aboard their yacht in French Polynesia with patchy internet, and Lydia joins me now in the studio. Lydia, this is not just a matter of them wanting to get out of the cyclone season and come to New Zealand, is it? Can you just tell us a little bit more about their situation?
Yeah, so this is a family that, sold up their life and went on the trip of a lifetime. They were in French Polynesia when COVID struck. They were riding it out there. They were having an okay time. Their end goal was always to come here. But tragedy struck in August. Unfortunately, their 14-year-old son was killed in a speedboat accident. They managed to get his body back to the UK and they've buried him, but they've had to return to their boat, to their yacht, because they need to keep it safe from cyclones. They need to be aboard it. They need to be moving around the island and the islands to make sure it's safe. Their whole plan has always been to come here to sell the boat to move home. They actually engaged brokers here in Auckland before their son died, but they were hoping that the border restrictions would eventually be lifted. Unfortunately, this application that they put in under humanitarian grounds was denied by the Ministry of Health because they'd already gone back to the UK.
And taken their son's body home.
That was why they got told it wasn't a matter of urgency for them to come here. Their argument, of course, is that their boat is their asset. It's worth more than $1 million. They're obviously planning to sell it here, and they need that money to be able to go home, to set up their life, to get their daughter, who is 12 years old, back into school.
Yeah, okay. So what has the ministry told us about where this is at?
Not a huge amount so far. So they are looking into it as a matter of urgency, but they're finalising their options and what might be available to the family. They haven't actually been in contact with the family themselves at all, though.
Yeah, and this obviously flows on from the fact that Jacinda Ardern has been asked about it in the media and she gave a commitment to look into it. And now we have the statement from the ministry. So we spoke to the family this afternoon and you've been trying to get back in contact with them. What do they know?
Yes, so when I first got in touch with them and said, hey, we've heard that this is a matter of urgency, it's being looked into, they were like, oh, not really holding out much hope. You know, we've heard that they might be looking into it, but we don't believe that anything will change at all. Then she suddenly replied to me. I was like, oh, I have an email which has come from our agent. So it appears that the broker, the people that are trying to sell the boat, are now sort of stepping in and they're actually being the mediation to the Ministry of Health. And apparently, this is what I've got in the most recent email, is that Health are developing a revised framework in response to applications such as yours. We're still not able to get an exemption on humanitarian grounds, but I can now submit a revised application under the delivery to a business classification. So this is all about them coming in to sell the boat. It's about the business making the money off the boat.
Right, because we know that previous applications have been approved, for example, for super yachts, right? So this is if they bring a boat and do some work on it that benefits the New Zealand economy?
Yes, precisely. It has to be about $50,000 or more than $50,000, but there are people who've been applying on smaller yachts like theirs that haven't been getting accepted for it. It does tend to be the bigger yachts, which are obviously going to have a lot more work needing doing to them.
Right, so the door's open for a second application as we see it now?
Yes, correct.
Right, thanks Lydia. That's Lydia Batham with that update, and we'll keep you up to date if any further news comes to hand. Labour leader Jacinda Ardern reckons if she said it once, she said it 50 times. It's a hard no to the Green Party's wealth tax policy. But National's Judith Collins has again doubled down on her claims a Labour Greens government would introduce a wealth tax despite the denials. It's 3 days to the election and the Greens are holding their final campaign rally, well, right now. And our political reporter Charlie Drever joins us live from the event in central Auckland. Hi Charlie, well given all the back and forward on this wealth tax, what's James Shawbing saying about it today?
Well, they're adamant that they're going to have the conversation on a wealth tax, but it's not a bottom line. It's a top priority for the party, but at this stage they're just committing to having that conversation about a wealth tax. Jacinda Ardern has obviously ruled out even having a conversation, but James Shaw is adamant that that will be happening if they reach the negotiating table.
It's potentially nervous times for the Green Party given their polling. So how confident are they that they're going to reach that vital 5% threshold or win a seat?
Well, we keep hearing from the party that they're not taking anything for granted, and that's fair enough. You know, recent polling has them just sort of teetering on the edge around that 6% threshold. So I think they'll be waiting with bated breath come Saturday. You know, they've been trying to encourage as many young voters to get out and voting at the weekend. They held a rally where they were literally marching students down to the voting booths. So they're definitely not sitting comfortably, but you know, definitely looking a lot more comfortable than some of the other parties that were forming the coalition government last term.
And for the people who are listening rather than watching us, you're up on K Road, I'm guessing there. I see a green flag flapping in the background. What actually is happening up there tonight?
So it's their last rally before the campaign. They've got about 70 people up there at the moment. We were just up there for the sound check before. They had some people rapping. Apparently there's going to be some poetry today. And of course we've got the 2 speeches from the co-leaders. They're looking at, I've had a look at the speeches and they'll be focusing on the previous COVID-19 response until now, and then looking at the future and really focusing on what not only a post-COVID but a post-carbon New Zealand will look like.
Thanks for joining us, Charlie. That is Charlie Drever, who's joining us outside of that Greens event, their last rally, official rally on the campaign trail. Only 3 sleeps to go. The Invercargill Council Chief Executive has considered bringing in a Crown Observer as divisions continue to rattle through the council. The Deputy Mayor, Tony Biddle, stood down on Friday, citing a toxic and unhealthy environment at the council and the strain of having to perform the duties of the city's mayor, Sir Tim Shadbolt. Our Otago Southland reporter Timothy Brown has more.
The troubles at the council table in Invercargill are well known. The Department of Internal Affairs raised concerns in August about the performance of elected representatives. The council has appointed an independent evaluator to lead a governance review and provide a plan for the council to address its issues. But on Friday, Deputy Mayor Tony Biddle quit, triggering the need for a by-election and throwing the embattled council into further chaos. She told Checkpoint she could no longer stand the toxicity of the council's environment and the vacuum of leadership. Ms Biddle says she still respects Sir Tim, but no longer believes he is up to the job.
I've always found him an absolute gentleman. He's always shown and demonstrated to me that he genuinely cares about people, and I think that's why him and I were so close. I believe we still share a good relationship. But I think this will affect him more because I genuinely believe he knows that what I'm saying is fair.
She says he was emotional when she delivered the news.
He was teary, although he has denied that, which is sad. He said very clearly to me that he was envious of my decision, and I feel that his wishes that he is really in between a rock and a hard place.
Attempts to contact Sir Tim today were unsuccessful. In fact, this is as close as Checkpoint got.
Greetings, it's Mayor Tim here. Thanks for your call. Please leave a message and I'll get back to you as soon as possible.
The 73-year-old has defended himself to other media, however, rubbishing claims he's not up to the job or only staying in it for financial reasons. In May, the council altered its governance structure to wrest more decision-making responsibility into the hands of all councillors. Since Ms Biddle's departure, Councillor Alex Crackett has also spoken out about Sir Tim not pulling his weight. Ms Crackett told Stuff he was an absent mayor and obviously failing in the role. Attempts to contact her were unsuccessful today, but the man who Sir Tim has tipped to take over as Deputy Mayor, Nobby Clark, says the dysfunction in the council is due to the work of factions and those playing politics.
Sure, there's some feeling towards Tim, but there's also some feeling towards the Chief Executive as well. And there are people lining up to be the next mayor, and I'm not one of them. I don't want to ever be mayor.
Mr Clark, who is just a first-term councillor, though a wildly popular one according to the vote, says if the council is failing, it's because of the inability to work together.
If you look at the royal family, I mean, the Queen is, what if she is, 90-something. Is she as active and engaging out in the community as she might have been 10 years ago? Probably not. Do the royal family then cover a lot of her personal engagements? Yes, they do. She is still the figurehead. And the uniqueness of what we have in Invercargill is, over and above having a mayor that's been there a long time, he has a significant status, I guess.
That celebrity status, as Mr Clark labelled it, has positives and negatives. But he says it's the council's job to rally around its democratically elected leader. Many councillors did not respond to Checkpoint's requests for comment. Others did not want to speak publicly at this time. But the two who did also defended Sir Tim. Councillor Peter Kett says he believes Sir Tim will be fine for the remaining 2 years of the triennium, and then a decision can be taken on the future.
We've got a good mayor. He's been great in the past. He has slowed down a wee bit, but he's still there and still very active.
However, he does agree something is not right with the council.
I first got elected in 1998. I missed out on a couple of terms. I've never known anything like this before in my council life. This is my 6th term.
Councillor Graham Lewis says he disagrees with the idea the council's environment is toxic.
I'm a wee bit sad that with all this dissension in the paper, seems to be a wee bit like sharks circling, and I don't think there's any need for that. I think we run in a not a bad council if the information gets out of how much work is being done, particularly by management, they would realise that the councils are also working very hard.
Emails released today under the Official Information Act by the Department of Internal Affairs shows the council's chief executive, Claire Hadley, and Richard Hardy, a manager at the department, discussed in August what the appointment of a Crown Observer would mean for the council. The pair shared a back and forth over the potential cost as well as what the role involves. But Ms Hadley started the exchange by saying she did not believe the council was at the point of needing to appoint an observer yet. The department's Director of Ministerial Advice, Monitoring and Operations, Anita Balakrishnan, told Checkpoint the department can only act under the direction of the Minister of Local Government. She says she expects to receive the independent evaluator's report and plan early next month. For Checkpoint, Timothy Brown.
And it is 19 minutes past 6. You're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Obesity has emerged as a political football in the final week of the election campaign, and whether or not it's a matter of personal responsibility. The National Party leader, Judith Collins, says it is and calls obesity a weakness. New Zealand has the third highest adult obesity rate in the OECD, and that's only increasing. Experts have condemned Collins' comments, saying it's a complex health issue. Alicia Foon reports.
Judith Collins' take on obesity condemned.
It's a very shallow and lazy way of thinking about obesity. Nobody in the whole obesity research area who has anything to do with it thinks that this is just a personal responsibility issue.
That's Boyd Swinburne, Professor of Global Health and Nutrition at Auckland University, dishing out his take on the issue. He says obesity is complex and requires empathy, understanding and a deeper level of thinking. 1 in 3 adult New Zealanders and 1 in 10 children is classified as obese. Professor Swinburne says it's not just a matter of personal responsibility.
People are creatures of their environment. Food environment is increasingly full of ultra-processed food, highly palatable foods made up of cheap ingredients, full of fat and sugar and salt, and they're readily available, they're heavily marketed, they're hyper-palatable, just available everywhere, and so that's what people end up eating.
New Zealand's adult population is the third most overweight in the world, while children are the second highest behind the US. The World Health Organization has called obesity an epidemic, and it's a major concern for Dr. Brian Betty, Medical Director for the College of GPs.
Genetics does play a role. Weight gain is actually very difficult to control. Things like advertising to children at a very young age influences dietary behaviours and attitudes to food, which can have a detrimental effect as they become older. I think the cost of obesity in terms of rising diabetes rates, cardiovascular disease and cancers is huge. We know that diabetes is 11% of the total health budget, and we know it's very much influenced by obesity.
Obesity in children is also associated with musculoskeletal problems, asthma and psychological problems, including body dissatisfaction, poor self-esteem, depression and other mental health issues. All experts agree that something must be done urgently to address the epidemic, but there is no one solution.
Obesity does need to be one of the top lists for health interventions in this country. We need more support at the front line in general practice and for general practitioners to address, such as dietitians, exercise therapists. We need access to medication. We also need society to intervene with things like advertising to children, the approach we take in schools, education, a whole lot of different approaches to tackling the problem.
Swinburne says Health Coalition Aotearoa is a group of more than 50 health organisations who recently rated political parties on their health action plan. This is what they found.
There are only 2 parties who come up to scratch, and that is Greens and Top. All of the other parties are totally silent on what to do about healthy food and childhood obesity.
He says changing Aotearoa's food environment, which has been contributing to the explosion of ultra-unprocessed food and drink, requires government intervention. For Checkpoint, ko Alicia Foon tēnei.
Almost 36 US states are now seeing an uptick in new coronavirus cases. Meanwhile, another setback in the race to develop a vaccine or treatment. The US drug company Eli Lilly has suspended the late-stage trial of an experimental antibody treatment because of a safety concern. Yesterday, Johnson & Johnson said it was temporarily halting its coronavirus vaccine trial because of the unexplained illness of a participant. CNN's Erica Hill has more.
More than 7 months into this pandemic, the U.S. is sliding backwards.
This is going to be a very tough winter. We may see a rise in new cases that exceeds what we saw back in March and April.
33 states now seeing new cases rise over the past week. Nearly half of those also posting their highest 7-day averages for new cases since the pandemic began.
Now is the time to act. Now is the time to do something about it.
COVID-related hospitalizations at record highs in 5 states. Positivity rates, which ideally should be at 3% or less, are climbing.
We're starting to see a number of states well above that, which is often, and in fact invariably, highly predictive of a resurgence of cases.
In New York, hefty fines and tickets as the city tries to contain clusters by enforcing masks, limiting gatherings, and closing non-essential businesses.
We're now on day 4 of the pause in those areas, and we are seeing some results.
It's not just New York clamping down. Across much of Europe, restrictions are returning as new cases and anxiety grow.
Each of the last 4 days has been the highest number of cases reported so far.
Eli Lilly pausing its trial of an antibody treatment today, one touted by the president, telling CNN safety is of the utmost importance, though without offering specifics. Johnson & Johnson just paused phase 3 of its vaccine trial because of an unexpected illness in one of the volunteers.
To me, it's reassuring that companies are acting responsibly and pausing when they need to.
AstraZeneca's U.S. trials remain on hold, pending an FDA investigation. Meantime, in Dallas, a big moment for Major League Baseball.
This is amazing.
Spectators, more than 11,000 allowed in for Game 1 of the NLCS.
It's just great to have baseball fans in the stands again.
The Philadelphia Eagles will welcome a limited number of fans to the stadium this Sunday.
And that report by CNN's Erica Hill. Perhaps the most famous sports star on the planet, Cristiano Ronaldo, has tested positive for the coronavirus. The BBC's Aruna Iyengar has the story.
5 times World Player of the Year, Cristiano Ronaldo is doing well, without symptoms but now in isolation.
I spoke to him. No, he is isolated in the room. From the moment he was tested positive, he went to the room and complied with all the rules of the General Directorate of Health and is there in his room. Obviously, he knows that we are here. He's in his room and screams down here.
He gave the thumbs up whilst watching his team from a hotel balcony. But it's a big blow for Portugal. Ronaldo is the national team captain. He was also the first European player to score 100 international goals in men's football when his side beat Sweden in their previous Nations League fixture in September.
Obviously, it is not good news. Nobody wants this to happen. But in this new context we are experiencing now, it's part of the game. Unfortunately, it is. So we need to deal with it. Therefore, we are prepared for whatever may happen.
Sweden and Portugal are due to meet in the 4th round of Nations League matches in Lisbon on Wednesday.
And that was the BBC's Aruna Iyengar reporting there. Sniffer dogs are increasingly being deployed at international airports to detect incoming passengers infected with the coronavirus. Finland is doing it, and now a research team in the Lebanese capital of Beirut is following suit. The BBC's Martin Patience filed this report.
In his spare time, Dr. Riyad Sarkis likes to compose music. And here's one of his songs. But most days, he can be found in the lab. For more than a decade, he's been researching whether different types of cancer emit smells that can be detected by sniffer dogs. And earlier this year, along with the French scientist Dominique Grandjean, he had an idea. Perhaps he can apply the same technique to COVID-19.
The accuracy of the test is fantastic because we have
a possibility to detect between 98 and 100% of people with COVID-19.
The smelling powers of dogs are truly extraordinary. If you dropped a teaspoon of sugar in an Olympic-sized swimming pool, a dog would be able to detect it.
So I'd be walking through the airport, the dogs would come up, they would sniff me, and they would know in that second whether or not I had COVID-19.
It's possible to let the dog sniff people directly, which is not the first choice of us. But we propose to take a sample from under the arm of patient.
Diesel! Diesel! Stay.
The dogs were trained at Lebanon's police academy. In the classroom, there were 4 metal cones, all containing a different sample of sweat. By taking a good old sniff in each cone, the dog's job was to identify the one sample which had been taken from someone with COVID-19.
Sur ce projet de détection du chien, du Covid par le chien.
One of the French trainers said he'd normally train the animals to detect explosives or drugs, and that this was the first time he'd worked on a virus.
Stay.
Now 3 of the dogs are operating at Beirut Airport, each of them screening about 500 passengers a day. A busy airport is, of course, a very different environment from the classroom. And while the dogs may be highly accurate, don't forget human error. The dogs and trainers need to work together as a team. And then, in order to scale up the scheme, you'll have to train up a lot of dogs and handlers.
And that was Martin Patience with that report. And before we head off, some feedback here on the Jarmans. They're on their boat near Tahiti, desperate to get to New Zealand. Chris says New Zealand is very wrong about this decision. I believe we should as a country be offering shelter to all those yachts that are getting ready for the cyclone season. They are the lowest risk travellers that we will see. They isolate on the way to New Zealand, says Chris. On the CBD, someone else says, surely CBD businesses know the reality. It's landlords that need to adjust to people not returning. Just a reminder, if you're not counting, we're counting for you. T-minus 3 sleeps to the election. Buckle up.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. The Greens co-leader is slamming obesity comments by Nationals' Judith Collins as out of hand and out of touch. The Electoral Commission has referred a person to the police after they claimed to have voted multiple times. The Māori King's former right-hand man has been sentenced to home detention after defrauding a charitable trust that funds the King's expenses. 6 people have been arrested in Wellington and the Hutt Valley after a 4-month investigation into organised crime. Those are the headlines. Our next news and weather is at 7.
Tonight on Nights, we've got a splendid history of Palmerston North to give away in this week's Hump Quiz. Kelly Lynch shares her love for the hoiho, the yellow-eyed penguin, a love so deep she's written a book about it. This week's episode of The Americans looks at the media in this year's US presidential election, and Julia DeBreese uses linguistics to explain the popularity among